Lo-fi as a concept has become increasingly popular over the past few years, especially musically. I mean, just listen to the music that I use on this channel. For the uninitiated, lo-fi stands for low fidelity, and usually refers to a lower level of quality or using something outdated or older because of its nostalgia and charm. Lo-fi games are games which are built with low-end graphics and other assets by smaller developers who don't have access to huge amounts of resources. Indie games can look as beautiful as AAA titles these days, and can have just as much money behind them thanks to places like Kickstarter. So seeing one fully embrace the opposite is intriguing. That's why I was so weirdly attracted to this little trilogy of games by an indie developer called Antoni. All of these games were created using hundreds of pictures instead of traditional graphics or FMV, and they're all horror games of different kinds. Instead of looking at something well known, I thought today we'd shine a light on the work of one developer which I really enjoy, even if the games aren't necessarily what you'd call classics. So, come on a journey with me into the weird lo-fi horror world of Antoni. I'm Will with Clickist, and today is our lo-fi horror adventure. I first came across Antoni's work while I was trawling the Steam listings for a game to buy. I came across One Night You're Crazy. I was intrigued by the game for several reasons. Firstly, it was entirely made up of still images in a stop motion style. I'd seen plenty of FMV games in my time, since I consider myself something of a connoisseur of the genre, but never one done in this weird stop motion style. I think the thing that drew me in the most, however, was the fact that it offered multiplayer, which is pretty mental for a game literally made out of pictures. One Night You're Crazy is actually quite an interesting game, which has you sneaking around a house searching for stuff. But before we really dive into it, I feel like we should do this in order, starting with the first game in the trilogy. I know I keep saying trilogy like they're supposed to be connected, but I don't actually think they are. None of the games really share a storyline or anything like that, but they're all set in the same house, and they all have one character in common, the Wolf Mask. That's why from now on, I shall be referring to these games as the Wolf Mask Trilogy. The first entry in the Wolf Mask Trilogy was actually released back in 2016, and is called Frightlight. The game is a quote-unquote parody of those jump scare games we love to laugh at. Those are the exact words of the Steam description, not my own, to clarify. What it actually means by that is that it's a rip-off of Five Nights at Freddy's, but much, much less annoying. Basically, you're set up in a house with your conveniently located CCTV system displaying on your laptop, when you hear that 3 escaped lunatics and a giant tarantula have been spotted in your area. As you can probably guess, this means that they're coming right for you. To protect yourself, all you have is your many, many cameras and a flashlight. It's a good thing that they all suffer from extreme photophobia and are hurt by the lights of a flashlight. Obviously, Frightlight relies a lot on narrative convenience, but honestly the story isn't really the interesting part here. While it is sort of hilarious with the overblown odd narration at the start of each level, there's a certain amount of creepy atmosphere going on as well. Once the voiceover stops, it's just you, mostly silence, and the occasional noises you switch between cameras. There's something sort of creepy and wrong about the still images, in a good way. Not that it ever really gets scary. The way you survive is by keeping an eye on those cameras. You then have to try and track the different bad guys as they stalk around your house, making sure that they don't come into the hallway outside of your room. You can't actually see them in the hallway when you look out there, you have to just track them and hope for the best. If you miss them, then they jump scare you to death. It's quite interesting having to keep track of all the enemies manually, not being able to see directly if they're right outside or not. The first you'll know about it is when you turn on the flashlight and a dramatic sting plays. Obviously the replayability on this one is limited, but for his first game in this style, I actually think it's not bad. If I had to give it one criticism, it would probably be that it's kind of easy. Even if you lose track of someone, all you have to do is stick your head out of the doorway and flash the light on to make sure there's no one there. Plus, you really only have to watch the 4 cameras closest to the room that you're in, and if they disappear from those rooms, react. It's really not that hard, like, at all. Moving on to the next game in the Wolf Mask trilogy, we're back with the first game I discovered, One Night You're Crazy. This game is a little different in that you actually have to move around the house this time, instead of just observing it from a fixed point. Because of this, it's also much, much creepier than Frightlight. The objective of this one depends on who you get to play as, although honestly the chances of getting to play as the Wolf Mask are pretty slim. Basically, you have to wander around the house from the first game and try to locate the 3 different pieces of the murdered teddy, which is in your basement. You have a limited amount of time to find them and put them on the bear. It's also not as simple as just wandering around searching places for bear pieces, After a pretty short period of time, you'll get hunted by the wolf mask, a person wearing an honestly sort of crappy looking Halloween mask of a werewolf. The little box on the bottom left tells you when something new changes, like when he starts hunting you or when he leaves the house to chill outside. I think the biggest shame with this one is that it has multiplayer but no one really plays it. You can still do it by having a friend buy the game as well, but it's a shame that there aren't many random online games. Basically, in the 2-player mode, one of you controls the wolf mask while the other controls the human. As the wolf mask, you can see the human's viewpoint while you're despawned, and when you come into the game, you have a limited amount of time to hunt them down. It's actually a lot of fun, if ultimately confusing. Unlike the first game, it's a lot harder to get through since you have little to no idea where the wolf is. The screen flashes up an exclamation point when he's close by, but you still can't tell what direction he's coming from, so you have to get pretty lucky to beat the AI. The other interesting part about this one is the fact that there's actually a little hub level. When you're not in a game, you can wander around the house to learn your stats or start a new game. In many ways, this concept could be expanded but done in the same style. Maybe have different environments, some extras or Easter eggs to find in the hub area, and maybe some other mechanics to give the human players more chances against the AI opponent. The final and most recent game in the trilogy is actually probably the most interesting. It was only released in May of 2019 and is quite a bit different from the other games in the Wolf Mask trilogy. Instead of being a game with a sandbox style of gameplay where the story is secondary, Real Scary puts the story at the forefront. You control a mysterious figure who appears to be having some mental health problems. You play through a linear story as the personal world of the main character starts to devolve. Each segment requires you to do different things, such as attacking an enemy or hiding from monsters. Your basic actions are controlled by moving around the house with the cursor keys and using A, S, D and F to perform different actions such as hiding in corners or opening doors. The story is sort of cliched but told very vaguely, left mostly up to the interpretation of the player. It's clear that some sort of spirit or creature is taking over the main character's mind, or at least he thinks that it is. Again, it's left vague, so it's possible that he's just fucking mental and hearing voices. The levels are kind of an odd mix. Sometimes you're just exploring the weird Euclidean style layout of the house and examining things. Sometimes you have to sneak into corners as creepy monsters stalk you around the house. Some of the more interesting moments are things like having to close doors before the evil spirit can get through them, or using your duvet to cover your face and hide from the wolf mask. Once again, the game never really approaches being scary, but it is interesting to see the developer trying out some different stuff. The linear story is very short, but then again the game is less than £1 just like the other two. Even if it only takes 30 minutes total to complete, it's a very low cost game to try out, and really isn't that the point of lo-fi gaming? Looking back at the Wolf Mask trilogy as a whole, I'd say that they all have the same charms. The use of still images for every single visual element beyond some text overlays has a certain appeal to it. It feels very much like the developer just used what he had at his disposal, namely his home, a camera and some knowledge of programming. All three of the titles are basically different genres. One is a stationary strategy style game, the other is a multiplayer item hunting game, and the last one is a linear story told through real pictures. Each of these games was made with, I assume, a budget of basically zero. In many ways, I'd like to see all of these games get more successful, because that way we might see a full-fledged game made in this style. I can imagine a game made using these elements again, but with longer playtime and slightly more details. I wouldn't want the games to get more of a budget and use too many resources, because I think that the lo-fi, grungy style really helped them out. If these game ideas had been made using standard graphics, I doubt they'd have stood out to me at all. At the end of the day, it's just interesting to see someone on Steam who is genuinely trying to make something which no one has ever done before. And so, Chris Antoni, I at least applaud your effort. I hope you keep making these because I cannot wait to see what you do with this series next. Thanks for watching. If you want to keep up with Chris Antoni, you can follow his Twitter at Foldberg1. I think, where he actually updates frequently about his latest game, Rogue Party. If you're interested in buying the games I've featured here, you can check out the bundle of all of Chris's work in the description below. Also, if you enjoyed the video, liking and subscribing helps out our channel just a whole damn bunch, and it keeps me the money I need to keep buying obscure indie games with Steam. Don't forget to check out my channel where I upload semi-regular content about such a wide variety of topics that it doesn't even bear mentioning anymore.